I got to sit down with review code for Deathbound, skilling, and throwing my way through a 4-character party-based Dark Souls-style game. But does Deathbound go beyond just another Dark Souls with a catchy angle? A more interesting and exacting question should be, does Deathbound bring anything new and lasting to a genre that, while once originally thrilling and new, has now solidly landed into the "here's another one, guys" kind of category? The developers have taken strides and different attitudes towards the entire genre to offer something different. For party member Dark souls connected in the darkness by nothing more than a push of a button to change to them and between them, and overlapping of beliefs and histories that, when in alignment, give them buffs. But just like a bad team, if you have one of them in the wrong place, all you get is whining and a workday that somehow is 2.5 hours long. It's like a stabby version of The Office. Sister gods of life and death have been going at each other for eons, with the goddess of life fooling the goddess of death into making people immortal. But then the god of death, who I assume was busy cooking originally, turned around and said, "Oh, no, you don't," and corrupted mankind, restoring death, and thus society crumbled. Ancient society. But now, with the Church of Death ruling the lands, they're hunting down Church of Life members, and that's you. And as a result, you travel around, gather up your band of traveling Wilberry undead, and take on the enemy. And you may be thinking to yourself, man, that's a lot. Don't worry. Good guys on one side, bad guys on the other stab each other until somebody's dead and win. It's an almost Hellgate London atmosphere that exudes right from the starting of Deathbound, medieval and current, not overlapping, but familiar between the two. The first men's world is one of pipes and fire extinguishers and skyscrapers. The world of now is high fantasy on lo-fi settings, distilled down into the tighter confines of experiments and two specific warring entities, but each offering power in their own way. It's not an overly magic world, but there is some in there. Like many games of its kind, Deathbound likes its labyrinthian levels, spider webs constructed by creators high as shit with no real care about what goes where. Levels made by 1/4 Jekyll and 3/4 Hyde. But the only thing disappearing here is your stamina. As you spin the game, murder clanging your sword off the sides of walls and corridors that feel like capillaries in the body of some disused monster whose body's grown to a gigantic size. Yes, it's one of those Dark Souls style games. But the specificity of when hits will hit needs some work. For instance, while both you and your enemies can hit and clang off the sides of the tunnels and the walkways and the bricks, meaning you have to switch up a quick to a vertical to a horizontal attack, one of the bigger issues is that sometimes when super close to the enemies, the hits actually miss them. A great deal of the enemies are more human-like characters, both dead or alive. Sword and shield, two-handed swords, giant spears, they Achilles through you from 200 yards away. It's a consistent act to measure distances, using the landscape to make sure a spearman can't shish kebab you one place and leave some space open to get a good swing on an enemy with the other, as well as checking your stamina, a sync meter, and health, as well as your experience all at the same time. If that sounds like a lot, I'm going to get to that in a second, because this game certainly has you track more than you might be expecting. I think we can agree, though, for Dark Souls games, there's that holy trinity of enemies, mechanics, world building. And the best games make the mechanics feel like a part of the world. The enemies make sense within it, and the world building's delivered through consistent progression through those first two. Deathbound presents at first like a somewhat typical Dark Souls style game, which means a lot of stuff to check off, like a grocery list from a programming mother. Bonfires, check. Respawning enemies when you use them, check. Stamina-based combat, check. Shortcuts from hub areas found and used to move back and forth, check. Stats like heal factor, stamina, damage power, attack weight, poise, critical bonus, sharp, blunt, and magic defenses. Also tolerances for different elementals, check. Multi-party, somewhat instant character switching with special attacks that get progressively powerful the more you sync. That's the different piece. 8 essences or characters, each with their own powers and likes and dislikes. A Dark Souls Tinder, whereas you unlock them and put them in your team, you have to make sure that Bob gets along with Sally, who doesn't just sort of like Kim, but also loves hanging out with Timmy. As you collect those characters and put them together, depending on how they get along, you'll get bonuses and weaknesses. The starting character is a warrior, benighted with a sword and board, swinging, blocking, parrying, spouting religious one-liners while smiting the undead and living alike. Weak and strong attacks mix with parry and dodging and blocking and make him the most basic at first. A nice starting template to a system that gets so weird and wild that for some wonderful and equally wonky reason is enjoyable despite its cumbersomeness. The first extra character you get is an assassin with some knives and a crossbow, which makes handiwork of even the enemies that just circle around you endlessly, like they were born having a stroke and can only turn left. In a magic and mayhem world, a second extra character you get is the Essence Mancer, a dude who shoots vasectomy-weak booger loads at enemies, and he is a depressive character, to say the least. Let's just say I've seen Brandon Schwab throw harder bombs than this, and that dude punched like his hands were wrapped in pillows with compliments engraved on them. But a better, more interesting, if at least in how they play, is a Spearman character, who, uses a spear to stab towards the enemies, which turned out to be a very useful character despite their inordinate number of spinning moves. Honestly, that character turned out to be really useful, even if cumbersome as shit in tight confines. But even with just having those 4 at the starting, it requires a lot of thought and perhaps a bit too convoluted than some people will like, especially as you get your 5th, 6th, and 7th. Let's just look at this HUD for a second. On the left, you have a HUD that is always there, up to 4 characters who are adjusting health and stamina, sometimes actively, sometimes passively as well. And you'll also have a sync bar to verify that your moves, as well as those of your other essences, can be dialed up for super moves. But here's where it can get confusing for a lot of people. When you swing, stamina goes down, contrasting your character icon in color. Then if you swing again, it goes down farther, and then the game also shows you having temporary hit points with a different color to warn you that if you get hit, your hit points are going to lodge there. But it's not really that low, because as you stop swinging, stamina regenerates going up. And while it's going up, if you swing again, it then lodges down at a different point, and you see contrasting colors going up and down on just one single icon, and that's not including if you heal, which can then damage the other icons. It's like watching someone's RPM indicator on a motorbike, but it's tracking decibels and, for some reason, temperature. I just wish they could have made it on the center hub and not that far to the left. Another issue is that the morph special attacks are animation locked, needing specific odd timings to pull off. It can take a long time to figure out exactly how the timing for each transformation is gonna need to be timed and performed. It's not all cumbersome. For example, the Essence Mancer, in a game where most people run on stamina, he runs on stamina but also something called burn. Instead of being maxed out via swilling down mana potions like a wino after winning a $10 scratch it, he builds up burn as he casts spells, and if they cast one too many, then that burn is maxed out and an explosion goes off, harming everyone, including you. So there is a lot being tracked in just the left side of this. With this many things being tracked, it's a bit like a teeter-totter made of razor blades, and then each side randomly gains 20 pounds in the middle of the game. The inventory switching, especially on the gamepad, is a bit off. So in general, controlling, it's X to drink a potion, but also hold X and then another button to switch potions that you want to use, right or left on a bumper. But to do a sync move, it's attacking, then hitting on the D-pad, which you can guess it, takes your fingers off the analog stick. It's odd, and there's only 2 different setups I could find in the control scheme. Never really feels quite there. When it comes to the talents and the skills, it's also a little bit interesting. Leveling up costs XP with the typical trees that you would expect, but each level you buy in the main body of the tree is buying it for every hero. So you can get an idea of the adjustments and how much they make, and then move towards a specific hero on the top, left, right, or bottom, and multi-tiered upgrades as well for them, which costs more than 1 point to buy in a row. Sadly, most offer the atypical +1 to stamina, health, or +10% to criticals kind of thing. They've kept the larger bonuses and indeed penalties to that party system layout that I talked about earlier. And you can jump in and move different characters and see what those bonuses and flaws are. If you get 2 characters who dislike the party makeup, though, be prepared, because there's actually a possibility that you may have ended up building up your character with experience points and buying normal skills, and when you find a new essence, there's really no good place to put them without impacting the skill you just ended up buying. While complexity's here, it's not without some bright spots. There's armor and jewelry, and they can give you some hefty bonuses, like major XP bonuses, and they can all be upgraded. When it comes to enemies, you got baby spiders suiciding their little poison-filled bodies at you, peeping to attack you, and then Mom and Papa Spider will just run up to you and headbutt your shins, which I bet hurts like hell, but perhaps they're a bit cross-eyed, because these sons of a bitches get caught on everything. And one of the first large, crunchy location-specific bosses you see is a monster who didn't seem to care who was in his area. He hit everyone, enemy and friend alike, a gloriously spindle-armed giant I like to call Dick Arms, whose silly putties, they ever living shit out of everybody with stretchy attacks that are actually surprisingly effective at maximum range. Imagine a third-person undead Delsum from Street Fighter. That's basically this dude, and I admit, in that way, Deathbound played the way I expected when it presents a challenge, especially if you aren't careful in tighter locations. The first boss, and the only one I'll talk about, Well, you refight them as well, shows up a bit in the start and then comes back later. It's an old crone, blind as shit, but with a cane that she can tap, tap, tap around the game world to find you. Or at least until later when she takes off her fancy dance ball mask and you realize she could see all this time, like the Inigo Montoya suddenly saying, "I'm not left-handed." This brings us to the presentation and the audio and the graphics. It's a bit rough, a lot of low-res textures and basic locations, and without any kind of jump button, the game does have a lot of locations only accessible by running up the side of, let's say, a tree trunk, and some super condensed level design that can feel like it not only doesn't make a lot of sense, but doesn't bode well for long play. It's a bit frustrating. Frame rate wise, I didn't have any real issues, which makes sense. For the first 9 hours I was in it so far, the game isn't pushing a huge amount of complex graphical fidelity, but I did like a couple character designs. But the presentation isn't really up there. And while it's been mentioned in previews that Deathbound's characters are a bit of a menagerie of mixed styles and elements, to me, that's actually a bright spot. You don't exactly know when they died. You get small story bits that tell the player that each had their own life as you explore, and you can unlock memories if you have one of those particular characters in your party when you see this pseudo-hologram magical vision quest moment in a game. I like those parts, and I actually like the different movements of the characters. Even though it was a bit janky, they were still different enough that it felt a little bit like classes that you would see in Dark Souls or Elden Ring. It's just that when you notice the difference, and that Dark Souls and Elden Ring usually to switch those classes takes a lot more work, and it feels almost like a different character who's gone away in a mini Rocky montage, having the instant switch here takes a little bit of getting used to. That being said, it's more utilitarian and at times pedestrian when it comes to the looks that can be directly at odds with the complexity of those systems that you will notice in the HUD and the UI. On the other hand, that's life. Boring people exist all the time with extraordinary lives. That's a little bit like this game. That brings us to difficulty and just fun factor so far. The game does have a much softer entry than most Dark Souls style games, infinitesimally so, with a healthy amount of let's just go for it moments where taking a hit or two isn't as dangerous as it could be in other titles, even with staggers and poise constantly threatening to stop a morph transform right when you need it. However, the open location is just not very good. It's pretty boring and the level design is not great. While trying to, of course, teach you about object collision and understanding range, it doesn't feel good when the enemies don't always get hit, even if you use the game's lock-on system or are just because you're too close to the enemy and it doesn't hit them at all, or watching your sword clang off an item and theirs occasionally will swing right through it, or one weapon catching on a fence and another swinging through it like magic. There's a bit of inconsistency. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, this is a bit like watching a single YouTube and trying to copy an entire channel's worth of ideas from it. It's not necessarily bad. I feel like some of that work could have gone to other places, including a greatly improved HUD and definitely improved level design. My impression so far of this game, as with a lot of good ideas, there's also a ton of problems. Complexity, where it can add to the depth of a game and make it feel unique. But that uniqueness may come in the form of people getting muscle sprains from trying to look back and forth between the different character icons, their settings, the enemies on screen, and then back again. The best Dark Souls style games are those where frustration runs directly up to fun factor but doesn't lower it. Instead, they sort of move in tandem like two cars down the road. Games where you can die a dozen times, and sure, you may need to take a break, but you find yourself thinking, I'm going to try this one more time. But I actually found myself coming back to the game many times. A softer callback for sure, nowhere near what we see in some other Dark Souls style titles, but it was there. Honestly, Deathbound's been one of the more confusing games that I've actually had to touch on. A glorious mix of ideas and roughness, complexity and counter ideas that consistently make one element and the other seem like they friggin' hate each other. I'm going to continue to run through it, probably covered on the podcast. This is a title you should probably check out many reviews or impressions for before you decide if it's for you. There are definitely some frustrating things here, but at the same time, if you're into this AA or B level style of game and at this cost, might be a title you're interested in. Check out the podcast on the ACG podcast channel. Join the Patreon. Peace out.